right, please welcome to the stage Macey, Keung, Luke Lace, and Sam Oropesa from for those whose dads were hard on us, and Fidel. Oh my gosh, how do you feel?
I feel good. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm very relieved there were some laughs.
Yes. Thank you guys for coming, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for staying for the Q&A. I hope we can have a good discussion. Yeah, I know both of you guys went to school in San Diego as well, so welcome back. And just to get started, I know that both of the films feel very personal for you. It's a lot, like both of them deal with family and healing. So I just was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the process of making the films and what motivated you to make these films.
Yeah, well, for me, I recorded that argument 7 years ago, and I obviously, when I recorded it, wasn't like, oh, this would be great for a film like 7 years in the future. But there must have been a part of me that knew that there was a reason I should record it, and I think that I wanted to feel like what I was experiencing was true, and it was kind of hard to tell when you're in it. And I think that listening to that recording again, like 7 years later, I found it kind of out of the blue. I completely forgot I listened to it, and it was 40 minutes long, and I just like sat there crying. And honestly, listening to it again, I think I noticed a lot about like how I felt about my childhood. I had a completely new lens on, and it felt unfinished. And so I called my dad, and that was the first time we sort of talked about it since. And since having that conversation, it's been completely like enlightening to how I felt about my childhood and how he parented me. And it's been super healing. And from that moment on, we have developed a really healthy relationship that I'm proud of how far we've come.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so I think I approached the film trying to ensure that I could make a film. So the film, we shot 4 days at my mom's house, my childhood home. And before that, I was thinking about like, what's the most interesting thing I can film at home where I don't have to spend too much money. And I had never ever like made a film about myself, and I think a lot of that comes with not being sure if like a Filipino lead is like a character worth writing. But I think because of the support of UCLA, I think I had a lot of like healing to do personally. So it's based off of like my own experience taking care of my grandma. And she was abusive and did lose her memory, so that was like tough for me to like really experience as like a young kid. I was like in the 9th, 10th grade when it happened. So I think looking back at like my grandma's life and everything, I knew that my grandpa like absolutely adored her. So I wanted to remember her in a different way and honor her for the person that my grandpa loved. So yeah.
That's so beautiful. I would try not to cry. But wow, I love how you both approached the personal relationships in such a creative way, and it sounds like it was a way for you guys to go back in time and remember things differently to heal. So thank you for sharing. I think, you know, a lot of us can probably relate to these stories, so it takes a lot of vulnerability and creativity for you guys to do that. So, you know, we appreciate that. And I have a couple questions for Luke, and then I have some for you, and then I want to hear, you know, bring them together because I see a lot of overlaps with the films. But Luke, you mentioned like you filmed at home, and I'm interested in what it was. What is this idea of home for you, and what it was like for you to film in your house? Like, I really appreciate the composition of the shots, especially the tree, the avocado tree. Like, I had an avocado tree in my backyard too. You know, the laundry hanging on the, you know, just like the little details. And it really did feel like home. And there's a line in the film where the mom says, "You are home." So I'm just curious what
I've never seen it from that perspective before.
So yeah, I just wonder like what it was like to feel my home and what does home mean for you?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I mean, I grew up in Southeast San Diego, went to Morris High School, and for most of my life, that's where I've spent the most time. So before moving to LA to go to UCLA, I was in Southeast like my whole life. So I think my perception of home is literally like the fence shots that you see, like where all the fences are like don't really match. And I feel like we shot on film because I've always felt that like there's a grit to the like working class community. And it's crazy filming at my mom's home because my parents are, you know, grandparents now. So there was a lot of responsibility on my end to make sure that the house was clean, because I feel like maybe outside of Filipino families, like there's a lot of clutter as like people age, you know? So I started taking care of my family in that way. And then we also shot during COVID. So we had to make sure everything was like tight knit, everybody was wearing masks and sanitized, you know, like I'm not trying to bring a crew to my mom's place and have her get sick, you know, like that'd be awful. But yeah, I think seeing the film with people reminds me that it's a film, and for me, I'm like literally looking at my house, so I appreciate the comment that you like how it looks.
Yeah, I don't know, it was, I guess it feels like I can connect with it, like I resonate with that, because like I said, my family, like the house that I grew up in had similar vibes to it, you know? And even just that line of like, you are home, it makes me think about like home is inside of us and home is actually like who we are. So it's not really the building, but the building can be a kind of physical manifestation of us. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and then the Nanai character doesn't see this space as who she is. So
yeah, like
that,
home.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, this is getting deep. It's deep, but yeah, I also was interested in, you know, because it's a very sensitive and serious subject, right? Like caretaking, illness, memory loss, like these are very serious topics, and yet you were able to make it funny and light, and still with a sense of care. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about like how you're able to balance these emotions and, you know, like, yeah, how? Because it was, I think, well done.
Yeah, I think, well, thank you. The initial versions of the script were really, really like strong and intense, and didn't have any humor at all. And then one of my friends that I was writing with came up with the idea of like, what would happen if she was in love with him? And I initially shot that idea down. I was like, I don't think that's the film. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, that'd be really funny because he already doesn't like spending time with her. And like, what if she's like so smitten with him that like it would drive him insane, you know? So I thought that was funny. I wish I had more time to write like a more thorough draft of that, but that was the best I could come up with at the time.
Yeah, no, I think it worked well that it was so subtle, and like the acting, I think, did a lot of that comedic work.
Yeah, she's amazing, isn't she, the grandma?
She's really good.
Just like the facial expression.
Her face is so cool.
Oh my gosh, I would love to keep asking more questions, but I want to, you know, switch to Macey. Sorry, switch to Macey. That sounds weird, but yeah, I like the selection of clips, and I was interested in like how you chose those clips, because I noticed there's a juxtaposition between the images and the sound, right? Like you see images of kids playing, and it seems like they're having a happy childhood, but then we hear like kind of more of your perspective on like your relationship with your father and with your siblings. So just wanted to hear about like your selection of the video clips and even who took these videos.
Yeah, good question. So the film is pretty audio-led, obviously, but I pulled as many just childhood videos I could find. I mean, my parents weren't necessarily filmmakers, so I was limited to a very select, and I think it was more of an intuitive process of what didn't take away from what was being heard in the audio, but footage that also kind of, yeah, like there's the juxtaposition of sometimes we like there you'd hear like about how something was really hard, and then you have us like playing, and then there's the part where my dad's talking about like growing up when your life's really hard, and I just have like me and my sibling, I think we're making like coconut water or something in Bali, like but it's a mixture of footage that my mom took, which is interesting, and some that my dad took. My parents are divorced, so the argument was a recording of when my dad had us for the weekend and we had a hotel room, so that's why it was like a separate environment. If that answers your question.
Yeah. So deep. I'm like processing what you just said. There's so many layers to it. Yeah, feel free to share anything else that you want to share, even as we're talking. But I also was interested in, just hearing your dad. Like, I think it's beautiful that you were able to have a conversation with your dad years later. I'm wondering, how does he feel about this film? And, even, I know you said you have a better relationship with him now. So how does he feel about the film? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I called him and I made the film, and then I was about to submit it to a festival, and I was like, I should probably show it to him before I send it to anything. So I sent it to him, and he calls me, and at first he's like, there's more context to this argument that you actually don't know. I'm like, it's not about the argument, Dad. Like, it's okay.
He was jet lagged.
Yeah. And then when I told him it got accepted to the festival, and we won one of like the awards at the Camille Gallery at UCSD, and I called him and I tell him about it, and he all he said was like, yeah, okay, like that's good. And then he was like really worried about like a film this vulnerable being detrimental to my reputation, which I was like, don't worry about it. But it was sweet that like that's the thing that he was worried about, was like how it would affect me and how I look, and I think that just like is a pretty good summary of how he is. And so I'm not I'm like happy with where we're at. And I also just wanted to say, like, being here and having a film so personal being shown here next to, I have my siblings that flew out here for this. That's my brother sitting in the audience, and my mom and my sister there. So yeah, I just wanted to give shout out to them. But yeah, making the film, it was, I think a challenge I had was trying to figure out how much context to give, because you're kind of thrown right into this argument. You have no idea who we are. And so I kind of had to think of myself like a character, and not focus, because there was like, this is a 40-minute long argument. I could include, if I include this one clip, that makes my dad look a certain way. If I include this of what I'm saying, it makes me look a certain way. And so you're only hearing a snippet, and it's like I have full control over like whether I'm winning the argument in this part of the film in the recording. But I think like none of that really mattered, and really what I wanted to get at was this idea of it's like he's right, like this resilience that he was trying to build on us from being so tough on us. I'm like, yeah, I look at me and my siblings, and I think we're fucking awesome, and it's like we needed this grit to make us who we are. But then part of me thinks, like, what if we did something and we had failed, and what if we didn't get to where we are because of like how he was. And I think there was just a foundation of love that I think could have been stronger in how he parented us. And I was like trembling as I like told him that. And so like every time I hear that clip of me when I like talk to him, I'm like, well, I had to put that in because that's what happened. But and so I'm really like glad that this film has been able to inspire others to like start conversations with their parents, and like inspire hope for more healing. So yeah.
Yes, because the title was, I was intrigued by the title and the fact that you used home videos, because like that kind of resonated with my own childhood. But as I was listening to your father speaking in both clips, it sounds like he really does care about you all, and he was just expressing it in the way that he knew how to, you know. And to hear you say like the love was conditional, like I think a lot of us can relate to that, you know, like that's real. Like we can only, like our parents and family members can only give us the love that they had received too, you know. So I think that's something that I saw in both of your films is like this idea of forgiveness. So just kind of forgiving for they know not what they do, you know. So I think that was really beautiful, and I wanted, if you guys have something more to say about that, I could talk more, but I want to hear what you guys think about like forgiveness, and if that was something in your mind, like intentionally that you were thinking as you made the film.
Yeah. I definitely think that forgiveness was the goal at the end. But I mean, to your point, it's like, in my perspective, I'm not even sure how that looks, you know? So the film sort of acts as an exploration of what that ideal is. And yeah, I mean, like, I think the thing I say about my film is that like the path to forgiveness is messy. So I think I illustrate that, at least in my film.
I think a lot of people can relate to the idea of like when you grow up and you're off at like college or you're by yourself for the first time and you have time to really be away from your parents, that you start to humanize them and you realize that they were also just people, and the reminder that like your parents are also on their first life. And so I don't hold any resentment for how they were, because they did the best that they could with what they knew at the time. And I'm thankful that now we have the power of being able to communicate and to talk about it. And I think that I hear about like so many of my friends and their relationships with their parents and like the, you know, subtle disagreements that they still get into. And I like question why we don't kind of raise the question a little bit, because at the end of the day, there's so much love there. Like there is love, and that the path of healing is possible. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's rambling.
No, I feel you. Love is everything, and you know, forgiveness is part of that, right? So even if they couldn't give us the unconditional love, we can start to develop that for ourselves and for others, right? Like the compassion and understanding. So yes, I think unconditional love is the way. So I'm gonna leave you guys with that. But if there's any questions in the audience, we might have one. Have time for one? Yes.
Yeah. I thank you both for your films. I thought it was also interesting that they showed also the last film, and like maybe think of like when I guess like things that stood up about both of your films to me was like how they both deal with like intergenerational trauma, and also like also filming as like memory construction, and also like memory isn't this like static thing, but it's like this thing that like you revisit. And I think like Macey with your film, you kind of play with both like old visual footage, but also like revisiting like both your dad being like, oh yeah, actually to revisit this is what I was going through, and then you being older to be like, okay, cool, like I hear that, and still like that's like not a justification. It's like it is context. Or like even your film with the grandmas, like I feel like both of your films kind of showed both like how memory is constructed and reconstructed, and also like I like both your endings because they're not like simple happy resolutions. They're like, oh, like actually like on the topic of love, like it is complex to like continue to revisit things, even like and not to erase those things, but to be like, okay, like even with the abuse and the trauma and the context, it's like to revisit those things and still being willing to try. Like I think about the character still coming back to try to spoon feed the grandma again, even though obviously it was hard. I guess my question is, how does memory and filmmaking kind of go into the process? Because like even like the grandma, right? Like it's like she's like losing her memory, and at the same time, it's like this film is like helping to like reconstruct like or like shape how she's remembered. So I think about how did memory kind of factor into both of your films, and like also as filmmakers, how did it like, what were the choices of like knowing like, oh cool, like I'm getting to shape the narrative that this is remembered as, even as we go forward into like the future?
Deep question.
Yeah, beautiful question. I think it's funny because I'm thinking that maybe I have a photographic memory, because like the room that he takes care of her in is the same room that I took care of my grandma in, and the same bed that I took care of my grandma in. So maybe for an audience, you might be experiencing literally how I see it in my head. I think the X factor there with like love and forgiveness and all that is like sort of to what your point was like humanizing my grandma's experience and like trying to figure out who that person was when she was like 21. Like, what does that person look like when she's like freshly in love? And like, you know, for the people who have like felt that, it's like exciting, you know? So I think in her mind, how can I envision my grandma being that age? And that's sort of like the note that I gave Lucy, to my actress, because I think when she first read, she was playing it like straight like a grandma, and I was like, no, can you play it like you're like 19, 20, 21, like you just got married in Las Vegas? And then she was like, oh my God, and then that unlocked like the whole film. So yeah, what she did with the role is like something that I could have never expected. You know, she really took it up to a whole nother level. But yeah, I think yeah, it literally is your point where it's just like, how can we see like our family for people capable of making mistakes, as opposed to just like who we remember them as when like they tick us off, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, also great question, and thank you for your words. I think the thing about memory is like maybe there's a part of it of like the fact that I can't remember it, a lot of it as clearly, that it allows space to kind of start again from where we are now, because when you build that resentment and you hold that, like kind of like in your film where it's like that's a part of her that doesn't exist anymore, like that part like it's gone, and so you get this like chance to restart. Like every day is a new day, and you're not technically tied to who you were the day before. But I also have a recording, so it's like what's said was said. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. You don't have to be who you were. You could always, you know, review what had happened, even if it is a recording that has these words and emotions. You could always look at it from a different perspective. You know, when you're no longer in it, you're no longer that person. So I think if I can answer a little bit of that question, from what I see is like filmmaking is a creative process where you can rewrite the histories, you can rewrite the stories to like reimagine love and reimagine freedom.
Yep.
Well said.
Yeah, so thank you all for listening. Oh, do you have a question?
No, I mean, if there's time, but if not, I'll talk to you.
Do we have time?
Jam had a question.
Sorry.
5 minutes? Okay, cool. Jam, you had a question?
Oh,
And then we-
let him go first. 'Cause
Okay,
he had it.
and then Jam, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So this is just a question about the generational healing, because I love seeing that on screen, but like rarely do we get to have a Q&A about it, right? So my question is like, you know, these like both of your films are super healing on multiple levels, and what's the advice that you would give someone who's going through this like right now? Right? Like someone who's caretaking, or someone who's having that argument with their parent. Like, how would you talk to that person while they're going through it to help them actually heal in that moment?
Yeah, beautiful question. How I feel right now is I'm learning a lot through what you're saying. You know, like I see a lot of like initiative in starting the conversation with your parents. You know, I feel like, me personally, I'm not sure if I've like really delved into like the specifics with my parents. But I mean, I think just like anything, like mustering up the first step of like starting is hugely important, because I don't know, you might run into like a new side of whoever you're dealing with that you might not have expected, you know. So I think that's what I would do. But I feel like only because I've been listening to you talk the whole time, you know?
Yeah, this is a really tough question, because if I were to go back in time to me, I'm not sure I'd necessarily change anything, but to people who want to heal their relationship with their parents moving forward, I think it's like it's not an argument. You're not trying to win. I think that really it's, and for so many of the other films, it's about like listening to each other and understanding. I think most of it is just I think growing up, I just felt unheard, and I didn't feel like he was listening to what I had to say. And so, just listening to each other. And when you approach that conversation with your parents, know that it's coming from a place of wanting to better understand where they're coming from and wanting them to understand where you're coming from, so you can continue building with love and that you're not trying to fight each other. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. And if I can just throw my 2 cents in there, because even the last film, Desync, was really about this topic too. And I think what it comes from, what I see is like, it's an acceptance that we'll never be good enough. And that's not to fault our parents or ourselves, but it's just the world that we live in. That's just the reality of it. This world is set up to make us feel like we're never going to be good enough. And so it's not really about like blaming our parents or blaming anybody for that, and just accepting like that's just the world, you know? So all we could do is like just accept it and stop trying. Over here, and then Jam.
Yeah. You go first.
Yeah, it's kind of a meta question, actually. And if I could take us out of the weeds, kind of to look down on the characters that you built, or the personal experiences that you created. Like, how do you as directors, right? How do you as directors cast an individual or get an individual to become an idea in a way that communicates to the audience that the body is responding as the idea would?
Can you say that again?
Sure. If I was
Yeah.
using your particular character, or the character that you cast, there's a set of emotions that you were, right? That you wanted to communicate that the character is at that time, and that character is responding with a body that is aligned and connected to the ideas, like your physiology is responding to the idea you have of yourself. In a way that if I understood your communication, your physiology is no longer responding that way because you have become something else, right? So it's a different idea, but an idea nonetheless. And so I guess the question was, for everybody, is how does the human being become the idea at all, given that the physiology is designed to look after the body, to protect the body. But then when the body becomes the idea, then the body protects the idea. Maybe I went.
That's so deep.
Yeah.
Maybe I can catch up with you again, you know?
Yeah.
Do the other question first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jam.
First off, thank you guys so much for being so vulnerable with your films, and I know that's a very hard thing to do. You can answer as simply as you can, but during the filmmaking process, during production or post-production, was there a point where you hit a moment that you felt like, yes, this is what exactly was meant to be made?
I do have a few words, actually. I'm a producer, actually. Hello. I haven't said anything. So that moment for me was during the casting process. So we actually had a lot of difficulties finding the actors for this project. And when we found Luis and Lucida, when we had their first reading together, we realized that they both spoke Bisaya. They both spoke Cebuano, and that was something that was really special because they both had the same native language. The film was originally supposed to be in Waray, which is Luke's family's native language. But I think that moment for me as the producer was when they found each other and they had that first chemistry read. They were able to talk through it. They were laughing. It's funny because in the film, Fidel or Rome is supposed to not understand what Nana is saying, but during production, he actually does understand what she's saying. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, and then I wanted to add that Fidel is the first film that Lucita had ever acted in her native language, so
Wow.
very, very special for her. I think for me, I don't think I've ever told anybody this in a Q&A before, but the ending is a blooper. So the way I wrote it was like super intense, and it's supposed to end how he doesn't understand her when she says I'm sorry. And then I realized that we had this clip of her like laughing, and I was like, that's such a rare shot, we need to find a way to like use it, and then it ended up working. So considering all the options, all the takes, all the angles, like after using the blooper and it worked, it was like, okay, this is it.
Yeah, I think that was a perfect ending.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. For me, I think it was when I called my dad and I recorded that conversation. I didn't tell him again. I recorded that conversation, but I told him after. And that was probably like a 30-minute long phone call. And you witness like a part of it where I think it's the first time that I really understood like what he was doing all along, and I was like, damn, that was like kind of clever. Like I don't know, like the whole thing that he said about resilience, and it was just the conversation itself that I was like, this is why I recorded it, so that now we it's not even like it's beyond the film now. It's the fact that like now my relationship with my dad, like I have more respect for him now than I ever have, and that's something that like I almost couldn't imagine that we would have the like a relationship at all, and not even like just the relationship that we have. So I think that it's been very healing to me. That was one moment, but I think the second was being able to show this film to my family and to my siblings, and I think that that's really bonded us. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience. I'm sorry we went over time, but I'm glad we had a good conversation. Thank you, and have a good night.